100 years ago, responding to concerns over governance and the disproportionate power of party bosses, reformers helped lead campaigns to adopt ranked choice voting in cities throughout Ohio. James A. Garfield, a Republican congressman and future president, lamented that gerrymandering and first-past-the-post elections resulted in disproportionate results. In 1918, Kalamazoo, Michigan became the third city in the country to adopt a multi-winner version of RCV, known as single transferable vote, after an overwhelming majority, more than two-thirds of voters, approved it. Even though they counted the votes by hand, results were known by the following morning. It was written after Kalamazoo's implementation that the objections to ranked voting on the grounds of difficulty in marking and counting the ballots should entirely disappear, and that people could mark a ranked ballot with a very low percentage of error, even at a first election. Unfortunately, the system came under attack from parties and politicians who lost power and privileges. In Michigan, the dominant political parties mounted legal challenges, and the state Supreme Court ruled that multi-winner elections violated our state constitution, though that constitution has since been rewritten. Elsewhere across the country, RCV was being repealed the same way it had been established, through referendum. Opponents of RCV often played on the fears of white Americans, namely communists and African Americans. By 1962, Cambridge was the only city that had retained its multi-winner form of ranked choice voting, which they still use today. Ann Arbor, one of only 3 cities in Michigan that still allow partisan elections, experienced an increase in third-party supporters in the early 1970s. The Human Rights Party won 2 city council seats, garnering around 10% of the vote, splitting support among similar candidates, and electing a winner that the majority of voters didn't support. In response, Ann Arbor residents petitioned to implement instant runoff voting, another name for RCV, and it was narrowly approved 52-48. The following year, mayoral elections were held, ultimately resulting in the election of Ann Arbor's first black mayor. He'd trailed 40-49 after the first round, with the HRP candidate having received 11% support. But after the instant runoff votes were tabulated, it was shown that HRP supporters overwhelmingly preferred him, and he won 51-49. The loser contested its constitutionality in Stevenson v. Ann Arbor Board of Canvassers, where the judge ruled RCV to be constitutional and that instant runoff voting systems do uphold the principle of one person, one vote. Officials from the losing party then organized a petition drive to repeal IRV, which they did successfully in a low-turnout special election on a cold, rainy day in April. The HRP never won a seat again. In 2004, a group of residents successfully petitioned to bring instant runoff voting to Ferndale. It was on the ballot that November and passed with over 69% of voters electing to switch to IRV. Before the amendment was adopted, a line was added stating that IRV would be implemented as soon as the city acquires voting machine equipment approved by the City Election Commission. They waited 14 years, but as of 2018, the entire state of Michigan now has IRV-RCV-compatible voting equipment. Ferndale's mayor is ready to implement, and their election commission has given the green light as well. As such, their city clerk expects to implement IRV in 2019, and their city attorney says they have the right to do so. Some outgoing state officials, however, say that RCV ballot instructions must be approved by state legislatures and added into our state's election law before they can be implemented. Others disagree, citing Ann Arbor and Kalamazoo as precedents. Regardless, RCV ballot instructions have been drafted utilizing best practices learned from across the country, with input from city clerks in Ferndale and Lansing. Elsewhere across the state, activists are organizing in their communities to pass RCV in the cities where they live. Movements have sprung up in Ann Arbor and Kalamazoo to bring back RCV. From Sheboygan to Hillsdale, Traverse City to Warren, Michiganders are talking to their friends about RCV, talking to strangers, calling their legislators, writing op-eds, and even drafting charter amendments to help implement ranked choice voting where they live.